Coming at you all the way live from East Oakland, California. This is Revolution. And this is another special. They're no longer going to be special. It's just what they are. So welcome to the new Friday stream. As you are hearing this, it is Friday morning. If you're a patron, you're hearing this Thursday early evening. So we did a special stream on Thursday, Pascal and I, in the morning for me, in the early afternoon for him. There is a special runoff election we're doing here in the state of California because there was a lot of moving people around when Kamala Harris left the Senate. And our state assemblyman for the area that I live here in Oakland moved on to become the state attorney general. So that means there's a vacancy. So the governor calls for a special election. And in this special election, the attorney general, actually their wife is running to replace him. And there's a few other people running as well. And he was a Democrat. Bonta was his name. His wife, Mia Bonta, is running to fill that state assembly seat. And so as I walk the dog, there is a campaign sign, and it is for Janani Ramachandran, and I start seeing the name pop up all over social media. And if I said special election, I know a runoff, it's like a special election. Sorry if I said runoff. And I hit up Janani and said, hey, I have a show, and if you'd like to come on and talk about your quote unquote progressive platform, come on. And she agreed. We couldn't work out a time frame that kind of fit within the show parameters, so we worked something out. We're gonna do a short show, about a half hour. And before Janani comes on the show, Glenn Greenwald actually had retweeted our show out, an episode we did with Norman Finkelstein, which is actually it is the most viewed episode that we have on YouTube. And had said actually good things about it, and Glenn Greenwald and I had a friendly exchange on Twitter about the episode. But that brings in a lot of new people to the fold when things like that happen. And immediately someone got in the chat and started kind of chastising us, if you will, for having a quote unquote politician on the show. And we get into a bit, I wouldn't say back and forth, but we definitely give you our stance on how we feel about electoral politics and revolution and movements on the left in general. So I will move out of the way so you can take a listen to our episode with state assembly candidate. The runoff election for the primary election is June 29th. So it's another reason why it was so hard for us to get her in, was because we were trying to fit it before the special runoff. But she got about as raw as she usually can get, in these discussions. I thought it was an interesting discussion. Pascal, of course, came with the questions. We confronted the housing question in the Bay Area, which is a very important question. We confronted gentrification, and one of the main things that Janani is running on is a $22 an hour minimum wage for California. So, of course, we talked about that as well. And she actually talked about movement politics and electoral politics and what even got her wanting to run, because she's never held office before. She's actually worked in the community, and not in politics. So I will move out of the way, and you can enjoy our episode with State Assembly District 18 candidate Janani Ramachandran. And again, that primary election is June 29th if you are a California resident living in District 18. Thank you guys for checking this out. Oh, and if you're checking this out early in the morning, later on this afternoon, Pascal and I will be on the Majority Report with Sam Sita. So we'll see how that goes. All right, thank you guys, and I am out. Hello and welcome. Yes, this is an early edition. We're doing a special live edition. I'm going to run this again for the audio only podcast on Friday that we're doing now. It is definitely early in the morning for me, but you know what? It's not early in the morning for my co-host. Coming at you all the way live from Miami, Florida, it is Pascal Robert.
Good morning to the chat. Good morning to Jason Miles. Good morning to the audience who will see this on Friday.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon, actually.
I've said this before on the show, and maybe you guys didn't think I was serious. I know Pascal was like, I'm hoping he's not serious because we do too much as it is. But I want to platform more local politics in my area. And there's a special election because one of our state assembly members, Rob Bonta, got the job as a state attorney general. There was a little shuffling in the state after Kamala Harris left as a senator. And there is a sign for this person literally on the corner of my block. And she started showing up all over my Facebook feed as someone I should know. We had people in common that also work in local politics, that are also community activists. She is, do you want to say her name, Pascal? Because you say it way better than me. Janani Ramachandran.
That's correct.
An East Bay native, where I'm from. She's the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants from a small South Indian village who work tirelessly every day to give her the opportunity to pursue her dreams. Janani's passion for justice was evident at an early age. At 16, while relocating to India for a few years, she founded a nonprofit that built libraries in under-resourced schools in her local community. After graduating from Stanford, Janani worked as a home visiting case manager at a community health clinic serving immigrant mothers experiencing domestic violence and homelessness. So she is connected to the community. And let's hear what her platform is. She's running as a Democrat. She is the Janani Ramachandran. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, Ms. Ramachandran, to our show. This is Revolution. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. As a candidate, I know time is allotted to you in very, very sparse, allotments. So we'll get right to the questions. In looking over your background, I see that you've been dedicating your candidacy to a more progressive kind of politics. Can you demonstrate or illustrate, I should say, for our audience, what distinguishes your form of politics and your platform from the traditional Democratic Party, more centrist kind of corporate friendly? Would you consider yourself a progressive candidate? Would you consider yourself within the kind of Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders mold?
Sorry, I have a real diva over here.
We are cat-friendly.
Yes, I would consider myself a progressive Democrat. And one of the reasons I'm running is because I don't feel like our conventional moderate centrist Democrats are doing enough for us. We've had promises for years to say, we're going to address income inequality, we're going to bring Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, and our California politicians have repeatedly not delivered. So I'm running as a progressive to push the needle. I'm not just saying we need higher wages. I'm calling for a $22 minimum wage. I'm not just saying housing is a human right, but I want to repeal two of the most anti-tenant laws that we have in our state that's preventing our communities here in Oakland from being able to stay in the neighborhoods that they're from and grew up in. So yeah, that kind of exemplifies how I'm different and not just about slogans.
The gentrification. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Pascal.
To give a little bit more meat to the raw sketch of bones you put out for us, can you list the three particular policy prerogatives that you are dedicated to that will change the status quo for the California natives in your district, in your area, and how you plan to get them implemented?
Yeah. Firstly, like I mentioned before, a $22 minimum wage. $15 doesn't cut it for anyone across California, for sure. But the way that in which I would actually get this passed in our state legislature is not only talking about, yes, this is going to lift millions of families out of poverty, but I would highlight the economic arguments. In the long run, cities that have raised their minimum wage see a growth of small businesses, because when you have more people exiting poverty, people have more cash to spend on local businesses, to invest in their neighborhoods, and to build up economic development. So that's the kind of argument I would use to pass a 22 minimum wage. The second big thing I care about, like I mentioned before, is housing, both tenant protections and our homelessness crisis. California, despite being, the richest state in the country, has 160,000 people that are unhoused and 3 million currently that can't afford to pay rent next month. So I believe we need to make sure we're building housing that's actually affordable, taking advantage of vacant land that we have sitting around and vacant properties we have sitting around, and pushing back on the really anti-tenant laws that we have. And the reason we have that is because most of our state lawmakers, even though we're a super majority of Democrats, are landlords themselves. If elected, I would be just 1 out of 3 tenants out of 120 lawmakers. And third, yeah.
Wow. That says a lot about the makeup of the state assembly, right?
It sure does. You can figure from there who's represented and who's not.
About that, there's also the gentrification question that definitely happens in Oakland, which is the district you are running in. Like I said, your sign is literally on the corner of the street I live on. I live off Keller, if you're familiar with that area. And even this area, which is pretty nice. I lived on Wood Street, if you're familiar with Wood Street in West Oakland, for quite some time, and saw the homeless encampment grow from 4 tiny houses that trendy architect built that New York Times used to always do pieces on as the future for what homelessness would be, right? The cure would be tiny houses, to blowing up to hundreds of people literally living on Wood Street. And you said you did work doing outreach work. What is the first step for us to address this issue, in your opinion?
To address homelessness?
Yeah.
Creating a 10-year plan to think about the problem. Right now, the state spends $13 billion on homelessness. In my opinion, it's not the amount of money we're not spending, it's about where it's going. Because there's no strategic plan. There's just throwing pockets of money at the crisis, hoping it goes away, and making politicians look good. So for me, it's about thinking about the various reasons people are unhoused. Yes, there are a lot of people who suffer from addiction and mental health struggles, but also 40% of our unhoused population has a developmental disability, and we're not talking about that. Plenty of our unhoused community members are youth who have run away from home. Many are veterans. Actually, 80% of women that are homeless are survivors of domestic violence. And that's the kind of thing we need to think about, the wide variety of reasons people are unhoused, because different people who are unhoused have different needs. For some people, tiny houses that have, dignified living might work. For other people, it might be a congregate shelter or a motel room, but different people have different needs.
What is your take on the tough sheds in Emeryville, West Oakland? They're kind of all over the city. What is your take on the tough shed communities and even Operation Room Key? Or can you even talk about your opinion on that kind of stuff? I worked at a Room Key shelter, so I definitely have my own opinions.
Yeah, I mean, with Room Key, I know people who have taken advantage of the program and are happy. It's flawed, but it's the first time we're trying to be innovative in that regard. But I used to work a lot with people who were living in motels and paying, $80 a night for a pretty crappy room, and using any income that they got to house themselves and their families of 6 or however many ever for a motel room a night. But as far as the tough sheds go, I don't support them. I think it takes away from the way that they've been done, takes away from people's autonomy. I know, for example, you can't have any guests over, or you can't leave after a certain time at night. And these are the kinds of things that don't give people dignified housing. I've been to evictions of encampments on Caltrans lands to be a legal observer, document the police, things like that. And, I asked some of the residents, were you given an alternative option once you're being evicted? Because that's the law. And some of them say, well, either no, or I was offered something via these tough shed programs and Operation Dignity, which people know is not a viable option, not something people want to go to.
You're talking about Caltrans down in West Oakland, or you're talking about Caltrans in LA?
Caltrans in West Oakland, and also they have some properties by Mosswood Park, kind of on the border of the 18th and 15th Assembly District.
Okay.
So I was wondering, since we realized that the Democratic Party generally has been part of the bipartisan consensus in the period of neoliberalism that we've had in this country, what exactly has been an obstacle to you considering running outside the Democratic Party to make these changes, and why kind of limit yourself to their purview by running within their confines?
So I will say, even though I'm running as a Democrat, I'm the most anti-establishment candidate in this race. And me choosing to run, given the political nature of this race and the names of some of my opponents, is an act of resilience. I identify with a lot of the Democratic Party's values, but want to push the needle further. I see my values in line with the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party, which is certainly the most anti-establishment wing within groups that are vaguely affiliated with the party. But I do think that here in the East Bay, especially in Oakland, you have Democratic Party delegates and Democratic clubs that are also not moderates, that are closer to me in wanting to push the needle and enact radical reforms.
So do you think your ability to make changes on policy changes that you believe are necessary are going to be able to penetrate the traditional kind of machine in California that has existed, run largely by the Democratic Party for quite a few decades now?
I do. I mean, let's start with the fact that most Democrats in California who are elected to the state accept corporate money. 70% accept money from the oil and gas industry, which is the reason why we don't have a real environmental legislation passed, even though everyone accepts that climate change is real, for example. Over 90% of lawmakers take money from PG&E, which is, our utility, investor-owned utility that has been held criminally liable for endangering people's lives. This is the kind of thing that drives our politics at the state level. But I see hope for change because there are an increasing number of candidates, including myself, that are publicly and actively rejecting corporate funds. And I hope that once I get into the top two in this race, that I will hopefully be able to use the power of public pressure, which we do have in this district, to convince my opponents to similarly refuse corporate contributions or police union contributions and the like, which is starting to happen. There are an increasing number of Democrats who are rejecting contributions from police unions and prison guard unions, for example. Not enough, but it's starting to happen.
Mm-hmm. What is your position on those? Many of our comrades on the left would say that we are not going to vote our way out of this economic oppression of capitalism, assuming you agree that capitalism is the problem, and you can elaborate on that. Those who believe that electoral politics or electoralism is a dead-end street for solving the needs and the demands of working class and poor people in this country who are being ground to powder regularly by the same political machine who I've always argued serves the interests of capital, regardless of the good intention of some who want to change that reality. That is generally the reality in America. How would you address individuals who are either activists or political actors who believe that the electoral arena is a dead zone for radical transformative change?
In my opinion, it's certainly not the only avenue for radical politics. There are a lot of fake progressives who say, you can only make change through the ballot box. No, not at all. I do think that you can couple strong social movements, protests, public activism with progressive lawmakers and policies to get the changes that we want to see. Because the reality is, for example, I'm part of some pretty radical tenant groups and tenant unions, many of whom individuals in which many vote, many don't, for the same reasons you described. But what ultimately impacts these same tenants are the state laws. And while public pressure can convince bad landlords to change their behavior, or rent strikes can convince certain things to be changed with regard to housing equity, what influences this whole sphere are state laws. So to me, we can combine the power of grassroots activism and movements with progressive policies, or else movements are just going to have to continue to fight and push back and push back. But the combination of the two can get to where we want to be.
Sounds good. So, Jason, you want to continue?
No, go ahead. Ask your question.
So,
I'm moderating the chat at the same time.
Okay. When we look at the state of California, you will find many, particularly on the right, who will say this is a state that has been primarily run by Democrats for quite a long time. Problems ranging from immigration, from housing, the unhoused, to poverty, to gentrification, to economically unfeasible living conditions, being that the price of of real estate and housing is out of the reach of most Americans, that the state is an absolute disaster under the tutelage and management of Democrats. And why should anyone be willing to trust the political management of any aspect of California to members of the Democratic Party? How would you exactly respond to that categorization by your political opponents?
Yeah, I don't trust a lot of our state Democrats. I'm tired of our state Democrats being bought by corporate money, being influenced by special interest groups that are harming people by making empty promises. And that is why I'm running. I'm the most anti-establishment Democrat in this race, and probably when elected will be one of the most leftist lawmakers in the state of California. I'm not running as Democrat because I think, oh, this will be a vehicle to help me get to where I want to be. Regardless of party affiliation, I have very clear values and very clear goals that I want to accomplish. And the fight here in California, because our state has a super majority of Democrats, the fight here is always against corporate Democrats. It's against moderate Democrats to pass the things, to get the votes that we need to pass legislation that's going to be truly progressive. So, I don't identify and support a good majority of the things Democrats do. And that's why I want to run for office to change it. I'm not, a politician. I've not run for office before. I am frustrated with the system, like many of you here and many of you listening, and that's why I want to step up and do something about it. And I criticize Democrats all the time.
An article just came out in Business Insider today talking about the difficulties for home buying. And as you know, as an East Bay native, you know how expensive homes are in this area, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing the article pointed out is that a lot of people are being outbid, if you will, by just cash. The ability to liquidate cash is what's separating even qualified buyers from people that are just liquid. And we've done episodes talking about the fact that now hedge funds are literally buying entire developments.
Separating episodes talking about the fact that now
hearing an echo, Pascal.
Hedge funds are literally buying entire developments.
What is your strategy to try to curb this? Because it's really pricing a lot of people out of even thinking about buying. Qualified buyers.
Mm-hmm. I think there are three things that I'm interested in doing. First is supporting legislation like TOPA, which is the Tenants Opportunity to Purchase Act. We need more small homeowners. We don't need large real estate developers, especially those not in California, buying up our properties. We need to expand home ownership, and it's extremely hard, like you mentioned, given the prices here. So I think TOPA is basically a tenant's first right of refusal, and a way to basically allow tenants who have been longtime residents of the building, for example, when it's being sold, to have the first opportunity to purchase it. There are some equity considerations about, who are these tenants, how can they afford it, but basically at rates that are below market rate. I also support legislation that would enact speculator taxes. One of the reasons our housing prices are so high is because the cost of land is so high. And part of that has to do with the fact that you have these outside speculators, like you mentioned, these hedge funds buying up properties, and many are foreign companies as well, buying up land. And I think anyone that owns more than 3 houses in a specific zip code should be taxed specifically for land. And this is not a new concept. Actually, a lot of cities in Canada have implemented a speculator tax and have seen housing prices go down as a result.
Is Vancouver one of those cities? Because they definitely have a problem.
Yes.
Vancouver has a horrible problem with foreign investment. Driving up real estate prices ridiculously high. You never lived in Canada at any point in time, did you?
Mm-mm.
Just the Bay in India?
Yeah. and DC for a little bit.
Did you do some lobbying? Just kidding.
No.
Just kidding.
A question I wanted to ask you is that who is your main competitor for this particular seat, and who's bankrolling them exactly, and what are some of the political contenders you're dealing with for your bid for this assemblyman seat?
Yeah. So there are 8 candidates in the race. My main competitor is Mia Bonta, who is the incumbent's wife, and the incumbent who is now our state attorney general, Rob Bonta. And she has over $800,000 of funds raised already, about half of which she fundraised through her campaign, and the rest are independent expenditures. And if you look at, who's bankrolling it, it includes industries like the gambling industry. It includes a lot of big corporations, dentists, certain conservative dentist associations, some developers as well. And, this is the corporate candidate that I'm going up against. I don't have, 1/4 of the amount of funding that she does, which means, you see my signs all over the place, but you're not going to get a bunch of mailers from me. You're not going to see my ads on CNN or anything like that. I am running a super grassroots campaign, and I'm rejecting and have rejected contributions from any corporations, from anyone that's not an individual. Because that's a campaign, that's the kind of politician political leader that I want to be, and the kind of independence I want to have. I'll stop there. I could probably go on and say things that'll get me into trouble. So.
Oh, damn. This is your shot to do it. This is right before the primary.
Yeah.
You gotta say the fiery shit that's going to get people excited.
Okay, well, then I will say one more thing. I mean, a lot of these interest groups that are funding my main opponent have interests in front of our state attorney general. So while some of these campaign contributions, like the gambling industry, they have a ballot measure coming out next year, which, there's a lot of involvement from the state AG's office. And while these contributions might be legal, they are certainly unethical.
That's kind of incredible that you're running against a candidate who is the wife of the current attorney general, and people who are allegedly funding her campaign have legal disputes and matters before her husband, who is the attorney general. Have you been able to do any interviews with mainstream media publications to highlight this in your campaign? Put this out in campaign literature or in any way?
It should be common knowledge. They have the same name. I think people are so oblivious to political families that it's easier to point at the Philippines and say there's a problem with dynasties that rule for 30 years and they're authoritarian. But when you have the same thing here with political families, even in this state, cats kind of go, whatever. I'm not worried about that. And it's frustrating. That's a real problem. That right then and there should be, every people in this chat that want to complain about and cry about, I don't do electoral politics, everybody involved in it is stupid, or it's just a waste of time, and you can't change the party from within, yada, yada, yada. I get that. I totally get that. But again, here you have on a state assemblyman level where you don't really see and hear a lot of this stuff. You know why? Because this show doesn't get clicks. This ain't AOC, and people don't understand how important this level of politics is. How important city council races in LA are because of how powerful the city council in LA is. If the gambling industry has their hand in state politics, how do you think laws get made? Right? When the bill passed initially that got destroyed with Proposition 22, a big thing that I didn't like in the bill was that, hey, we're going to give you guys some rights, you gig workers some rights, but you can't unionize. You would think that was going to be enough. That's a major concession to make. Who makes that concession? Miss Ramachandran, I'm sorry, I almost said your name wrong.
That was right.
Okay. Pointed out that the majority of people in the state assembly are property owners. Who do you think is passing these bills to round up homeless people and throw them in fucking tough sheds? This is why these things are important. So I'll get off my high horse now.
I mean, for me, my position is this, is that politics on the inside have to have a correlation to politics on the outside, but ultimately there has to be politics on the inside. I'm not one who says that electoralism is the definitive way to get everything done, but I'm also not one who will cede the electoral campaign mechanism to the corporate forces that have already and historically used that as a vehicle to maintain their power over the condition of the lives of the majority of this country, majority of people in this country, and to the disservice of the majority of people in this country. So I think that we have to be very smart in understanding that, yes, we want to build strong, powerful, radical, grassroots movement that challenge capital and the state. And we have to decide whether we want reforms or we want revolution. At some point, that determination will have to be made. On that way to quote-unquote revolution, if that's what you want, there is nothing wrong with getting the state to concede to make the quality of your life of your coterie, your citizens, your comrades better through reform policy. Now, we shouldn't fall asleep because of reform, as we did during the 50-year counter-revolution since the death of Dr. King. But at the same time, we shouldn't act like making society more humane for those who have been deemed the wretched of the earth is not something we're not interested in as well. And I think that we have to balance those two things if we want to be real about changing society for our folks out there.
You have any parting words you want to say?
Well, those weren't parting words?
No, not you. I forget, you can't tell who I'm looking at. We're not in studio.
I really want to thank you both for giving me the space to be here. You know, both of you are absolutely right. Politics alone is not the solution, but we can work together alongside revolutionary social movements and support each other because of the inequities that I talked about. We need more than just two tenants in our state legislature. We need people who don't take corporate money. We need people who are going to fight back against their own people in the own Democratic Party. And I'm willing to do all of those things. If there's one thing people know about me in the course of this race, is that I speak my damn mind, and I don't care about how unpopular that might make me among the special interest groups or among people who might even be my future co-workers and colleagues in the state legislature. I was about to say comrades, but none of them are really probably identify with that term. So
no, you don't want to. You got to wait till you get in before you start saying that shit. What happened to Janani? She disappeared. Don't ask any questions. Ms. Ramachandran, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. Good luck. June 29th, wherever people are listening and watching this show, there's links in the description to her campaign. Also, I'm going to be running this again as an audio-only podcast on Friday. So, and I'll send you the link that you can share out to replay this. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. There you go. That was Janani Ramachandran from the East Bay. I wanted to get into where exactly she was from, but time was limited. Pascal came with the fiery questions. The chat was a little spicy because, everybody hates electoral politics. So.
And listen, man, I get that. I get Jason and I, we talk about this. We talk about why we don't
every day.
We talk about why we don't have a chance. That talks about what kind of dress AOC is wearing today, every day of the week, like some others want to cover. Not that we don't cover electoral politics, but we do not fetishize electoral politics as the answer to the question. And yes, we are a political show. Yes, we are a show with the title "This is Revolution." We are not afraid of revolution. We are not against revolution. But revolution doesn't mean it's going out there with a hammer and sickle saying like "down with the state" and then having 5-0 come and pick you up and lock you in and slam you in the prison. Revolution has to be strategic. Revolution also has to realize you got to do political education to build your cadre. Who will be the ones who will be willing to be on the front lines, to organize, to also give political education to the masses in your communities so they know what policies they want to fight, what they want to challenge. At the same time, we have to realize that, having politics that pushes the state and capital to make concessions to our demands is not necessarily a bad thing. We just need to make sure that kind of politics does not demobilize the energy within our rank and file and in our cadre. But we have to be strategic about this. We shouldn't just think that writing articles and having podcasts and joining certain organizations is going to be the answer to the question. No, we don't believe that.
Yeah.
We believe that I believe this, and I believe Jason agrees with me. We do this as a form of political education. That's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, is to open the Overton window to people who are not used to left politics. I have people in my personal family who watch our show and like our show, who are not exactly leftists, who are not exactly, Marxist-Leninists or Marxists or Trots or anything else. I have regular friends who are corporate people who work in finance who watch our show, who are Patreons. They say, I love your content because you guys just talk about things in a smart way. So again, this is a process of political education. We have to reach the masses and have them asking basic questions like, why doesn't capitalism work for everyone? I thought capitalism is perfect, and make them challenge that thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Democratic Party was wonderful because they're not racist. Maybe both parties have racism in it.
Yeah.
What do you mean Obama wasn't a wonderful politician for the working class and most Americans? What? Or that yes, Republicans are horrible, but Democrats have done horrible things too. Or maybe you should think about not trusting any party, or putting in politicians who are more radical than both parties. Or think about a strategy to move your politics to a more radical position.
But a middle finger for middle finger's sake to me isn't really radical politics. It's just you don't really have any politics. Like we're talking about a person running for a state assembly race. Like I will say it again. This isn't, a congressional race, and this woman is not AOC. She does not have a very large social media platform because she actually does shit. And when you're actually in the streets doing shit, you kind of don't have time to get into Twitter beef.
To the larger point, man, is that we've got to understand that having people who understand our cause and what we're trying to push get into those key positions on a local grassroots level is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad look. It's not necessarily a bad look. I've always said, and Jason knows this, that the benefit of having people who say they're on your side in those political offices is not that you expect them to do what you want or that they can't be fought. It's just that when you fight them, at least they should hear you out. When I listen to most regular Democrats or even most corporate Democrats, even some progressive Democrats, I don't expect them to listen to when we make demands, but that's why we have to fight them. Some of the ones that we got in power, at least we can say, we got you here. So we should expect that they listen to us when we start fighting them. We need to fight them all. Just like our guest today. If she gets in power, that doesn't mean you stop fighting.
Exactly.
But at least we would hope that she would give us an audience so that she could say, listen, yeah, we helped get you here, or we supported you, but we supported you here because we realized we'd have to fight you at some point, and we know at least you'd have to listen. If not, we're going to fight you like everyone else.
Jeremy asked, can you talk about the utility of running candidates in nonpartisan races?
Well, I think that whether the campaign is partisan or not is irrelevant for me. I think what is relevant is that, are you supporting a candidate that is ideologically and policy wise wedded to a concept of society that you believe reflects the interests you want to see demonstrated in government? If you are interested in a public goods government, where government is at the service of citizens and humanity to make society more humane for its citizenry, then you should support candidates who are dedicated to that vision of politics and policy, regardless of whether or not the election is contentious based on partisan races or nonpartisan. That's for me, that's irrelevant. What's relevant is that I'm supporting someone. For me, if I'm going to support someone, they see and agree with my political vision. Now, and I'm not saying that I'm particularly supporting anyone, and not necessarily Ms. Ramachandran. I'm going to give her a platform because she seems to be in line with having a world vision that supports making the world a better place for people who have been, on the margins in this society. The question becomes, how can we make more politicians who are in line with that worldview? And what this particular moment in time is important in history, from my vantage point, is that we have a brief window of opportunity to use the schism in the Democratic Party to elicit more candidates who are more interested in that public goods form of governance, who look at politics and government as a means to serve humanity as opposed to serving capital, the ruling class, and the power elite. And that should be our driving force in deciding, are we going to support these people? And not have some kind of, celebrity fan crush with them. Understand that they are people we put in power. They work for us. We shouldn't be enamored with them. And we have to fight them and challenge them when we have to. That's my worldview, and that's the way I look at it. If some disagree.
And that to me is kind of the problem, right? That there is a celebrity fan crush for better or for worse. And that's the way it acts out. These aren't celebrities, they're public servants for the most part. And again, when people say a politician, this is a regular person that was like, I'm going to run for office, for a state assembly seat. And when people start saying, oh, they're platforming a politician, it's like, what? Why do you think I got Joe Biden on the show all of a sudden?
Yeah, I mean,
she's not Ro Khanna. It's silly. It's silly.
What better ways to challenge a politician for what they may do to betray your thoughts at some point than to give them a platform and defend themselves?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we're endorsing her or endorsing them. We'd like to hear what they are dedicated to in terms of a worldview, policy, politics, and ideology in terms of how they look at the world.
I'll ask this question to those people that are going to listen to this show in California. Who else is talking about the fact that the now Attorney General's wife is running to fill his seat? Is anyone else talking about that? Like, I really want to know who gives a damn about political legacies like that happen all over this country. Who even knows who's in their state assembly? We're going to do a show later today at 6 p.m. Pacific time with
9 p.m. Eastern.
with Billy Mintz, who made a documentary called The Guardians about guardianship in mainly Las Vegas, Nevada, but this happens all over the country. elderly people getting snatched out of their homes, thrown into elderly care facilities, all their money and shit taken. In some cases, families ending up homeless because of this. All this is controlled by the state legislature in Nevada. The attorney general is doing nothing to stop it.
Again, I want to make this clear because there are going to be a lot of people like, these guys have a podcast called This is Revolution and they're supporting electoralism. No, what we're supporting is giving people political education and options to know what is the reality of the politics we live in. And that knowing that the primary goal of our politics at This is Revolution is to challenge the state and capital. The question is, how do you do that effectively? And the question is that, can you have people in these positions of power that are sympathetic to your long-term goals of increasing the quality of life for humanity, that you can actually depend on them when you have to fight them to make the concessions needed to help along that way? No one here is saying that we're afraid of the revolution. Listen, if it gets bad enough, the state has to go, the state has to go.
Mm-hmm.
What we're saying is that we want a revolution that is strategic, intellectually sound, politics and policy sound. And if we have to get to the point where it gets to the point where, the deep state really wants to take us out, that might happen. But we got to give some political education to the cadre, the people who will eventually be cadre at some point, because we are far from that at this point.
Yeah. And again, ultimately, it was, you have a person that's taking crazy corporate money that is part of it, a family that's replacing someone for a seat. And this shit's pretty important to me because, again, the neighborhood I live in now, it's all right. But there's 2 kids that are living in their car and we're having a heat wave. And when you live in your car, for the most part, you don't want people to know. And that's why they're parked up here, kind of in, I wouldn't say in the middle of nowhere, but in a pretty discreet hill that people just fly down. No one's paying attention, but I got to walk the dog. And I saw the kids trying to hide in their car with the windows down. Because the first thing you do when you live in your car, right, you roll the windows up, you try to put as many shades up. And this is coming from someone that fucking lived in a car. And it was moving on up when we got a van. And they're trying to sit, hiding because they're embarrassed that I pretty much figured out they're living in the fucking car. That's a reality. And I don't want more people that are beholden to real estate lobbies because maybe they are part of it themselves. We did a whole show about that with Tracy Rosenthal. Snatching up motherfuckers from the street. Did a whole fucking video for Zero Books before the Oscars. All right, homeless bitch, you got 2 choices. Your ass can go into shelter or jail. We're going to take your shit, throw your shit away.
Someone asked about the importance of the term cadre. Cadre is a small group or several groups of individuals trained in certain skills or politics that push forth your particular political project ideology. For example, some would argue that the Black Panther Party, or they would even argue, was a cadre-based organization in that the rank and file of the organization had a political education that trained them to propagate the ideology and the thinking of the movement. Building cadre or building a core group of dedicated membership is one of the important tools you have to do when building a revolution. So you have to have not only rank and file membership, but you have to have cadre who can implement the policies, implement the political education, whether they be in groups of 100, 500, 100, or 1,000. But you got to build cadre who are willing to follow the particular value systems and thinking of your political platform and take that agenda and propagate it and increase it to make it a popular, strong, radical, or revolutionary force.
And on that note, we promise to do a very, very short stream. This will be up Friday for the audio podcast. Of course, it's up on YouTube, where you guys can all watch it. Later tonight, like I said, 6 p.m., 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be talking with Billy Mintz, director of The Guardians, a great documentary that I really enjoyed. You can check it out on, I think, Amazon. It might even be on YouTube. I'll have the show event posted shortly. Are you ready for that show, Pascal? Did you watch the documentary? You didn't watch the documentary.
I'm actually going to watch it this afternoon.
So I'm excited that the cat reached out or responded back, and he's watched a few episodes on the show, so he says he's ready. So we'll see. We'll see, Billy Mintz, how ready you really are. But thank you again, Janani Ramachandran, for coming on the show. And we are